All right, what's going on?
What's up,
Welcome
man? How's it going?
to REI 101. Alberto, my brother, how are you doing today, sir? Happy Monday.
I'm doing well, man. Just I thought spring had sprung, but it's like winter 2.0 outside. It's weird.
Yeah, nature is playing games with us,
Yeah.
which is
So,
good because I like a little bit of coolness, just a little bit of heat hit yesterday. It's like summer's coming. Just kidding. Here's a little bit of nippiness. And so,
yeah. I'm
uh,
not complaining though. I like it.
yeah, you don't really complain that much, Albert. So
Thanks.
I'm really surprised. I'm just kidding. So, yeah, great week. We are trucking along with our March series, our deal analysis series. And sometimes when we do things the right way, when we provide answers to the questions, it's the answers to the questions that result in more questions. So we have even more questions this week than we did last week. It feels like a step backwards, but it truly is a step forward. So we asked Sean to come back on because, Sean, you still haven't closed this deal. Why are you slacking? Why are you taking so long to get this deal going?
It's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess, sometimes, Just gotta wait for that inspection to get done.
Yeah, well, every time there's a bump in the road, we have to ask ourselves, could my agent have prevented this? And the answer is usually yes. So we're we're gonna hit we're gonna hit on that. So catch us up. You've been under contract now for over a week. Where are
Yeah.
you in the process with this property? Because I know.
Um, yeah, I mean, basically, I'm just waiting on the inspection. It's you know, gotten scheduled a couple times, and then just things hadn't been turned on or whatever, and so it's just been delayed. So I'm just waiting on that inspection report to see what all's going on the ends, the inside of the property and all that.
So Albert, to catch you up for the, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but property's under contract, buyer goes out, sends inspector out, and twice, almost three times, inspector shows up to the property and there's no utilities turned on.
Okay.
So how how often does that kind of stuff happen with investors? Do you see that a lot in
With
your
me
side?
as an investor,
Yeah,
never.
buying.
It never
Well, you
happens.
selling never
Yeah. Never happens. If I'm buying,
on the buy side.
I don't think it's ever happened if I'm buying either. And we've closed on quite a few deals. Most of the deals that we close on though, they're like full gut remodels.
Yeah,
So
you weren't expecting
um,
much, anyways.
we're not really inspecting anything. And when we do order inspections, when we're on the purchasing side, honestly, it's never happened. It's never happened. So, but I think that's part of the contract, though, is the utilities need to be turned on for the inspection, typically, right?
That is a part of the contract. We do
Yeah.
run into this mostly when we have investors that are just like they're moving fast or they got multiple projects going on or they got their hands full and
Hmm.
they're trying to do too much. And so sometimes they think that the utilities are on and they're not. Um, but what has happened, most of the time what happens is the water is not on and it's not on at the meter. So it's usually a pretty easy fix. However, this is very important to know. Your inspector is not going to turn that water on. So if the water is off at the mains, your inspector's not going to do that. And if the power is off at the breaker, your inspector's not going to flip breakers. They're not supposed to do that.
Right.
Um, that could be a liability if they turn on a breaker. And this happened. This happened in a property we had under contract about a month ago in front of the seller. The seller was at the property at a $1.4 million property, and the inspector started sticking his finger in the wires of the electric panel and said, "Let me show you something." He said, "Let me show you something" to the seller, stuck his finger in the panel and blew a breaker right in front of the seller. Um, it was an active business too, and it costed him some money. It costed him some business. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. So Sean, question for you. Before we start,
Okay.
I know you have questions for us. So my question for you is, what questions do you have for us? What is it that you're unsure about? Because you got, just to recap for everybody, Sean bought a 4 unit complex, kind of lower budget, decent price, good rental market. The whole property is vacant. So he's going to be losing money on day one. So he's basically in a race against the clock to get the property cash flowing, get it filled with tenants. And that whole process, once he closes on this property, the whole process of filling it with tenants is, it's time sensitive and it's hard work. And you can make some bad decisions, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you from making poor decisions. What are you most unsure about when it comes to moving forward with a 4 unit little beginner apartments?
Um, I mean, I guess we kind of touched on the like this whole screening process, and I'm not that concerned about that. I guess I'm honestly kind of more concerned where I'm like, coming into it as a complete noob at all this. Really hadn't figured out how to do like the payments and stuff for like the renters and all that. Like, I don't
Okay.
know if I'm supposed to just pay a third party company to do that stuff for me, or if it's pretty straightforward to just go ahead and do it myself.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
mentioned the screening process.
Hmm.
And you mentioned how to collect payments, which see, to some people that might not seem like a big deal, but if you don't know how to do it, it's a mystery.
Right.
Other than those two, did you have anything else that?
Um, I mean, I guess those are like my main two concerns because I mean, with any extra expenses, you had mentioned like reserves. And I mean, something that I had learned was that, in order to buy a rental place, like you have to have 3 months of what would be the rental income already sitting, in your bank untouched, in order to even complete the paper or the transaction.
You're talking about
So,
criteria for a tenant?
no, that like the criteria for just purchasing the property. Uh,
Mm. Like for your loan?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
So they want you to have reserves. Okay, got you.
right.
Okay. I
But
wasn't sure if you're asking about your own reserves or you're asking for, you want your tenant to have something.
okay, well, I mean that's news to me. So I guess you that's part of the whole screening part, and kind of seeing what their financial situation is.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can break down the screening process and then we'll talk about payments and then we'll talk about your financing, right? That's what you're
Hmm.
asking about. Okay.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah, you want to start us off with the screening, Albert?
Yeah, yeah, I can help out with that. Um, so we use software, Sean, really to handle all of the screening, the application process as well. We even have a pre-qualification process. So sometimes we get potential renters that aren't working with agents. And I don't know if you're going to be working with an agent to list the properties for rent, but if you do, that's great. I do recommend that you use an agent, but sometimes you may want to do for rent by owner, which is perfectly fine too. Anyway, you may get people that aren't working with agents, so they're not really pre-qualified to come and take a look at the
Hmm.
property, take a look at the unit, and you don't want to waste your time or your agent's time. So we use software called Rent Ready. There's another one called Turbo Tenant as well. We've been using Rent Ready since 2021, like this whole time,
Hmm.
for all of our rentals. And again, it's got like this ecosystem of a pre-qualification. Once they get through that, they're in your system at that point in time. Then they come take a look at the property. If they're interested in the property and they meet your general criteria, and that might be, for instance, maybe you want them to have like a 620 credit score or higher.
Hmm.
And typically, people ask when landlords want them to make like a gross income of like 3 times the rent. But I think nowadays, 2.5 times is probably a
Hmm.
little bit more realistic. So that's what we
Yeah.
ask for is 2.5 times. We let people know, and again, we're putting this all in our listing description. So we let them know all of this stuff ahead of time. No violent felonies, no bankruptcies, no evictions, and pets on a case by case basis, which we
Hmm.
kind of talked about last time,
Hmm.
right? So they go through that pre-qualification. Once they're pre-qualified, they come take a look at it. Again, they're interested, cool, great, and they fill out the application on the Rent Ready website. So you're not even handling that part. And during that application process, they're uploading all of their financial documents. Like it's connecting to their banks. So it's already downloading all of their bank statements for like the last 2 or 3 months. They can upload their check stubs, they can upload their ID, all their previous landlord information, their references, and all those things. Um, and then it's up to you to do the research and verify that information. The
Hmm.
Right.
agents typically don't do that for you. They'll send it to you and then let you do it. Some agents will, but I think that kind of opens them up for some liability because really it's your decision at the end of the day.
Right.
And so then what I do, for our rentals is, I make phone calls. Do not skimp out on this part. And I'm a little
Yeah.
bit more, I dig a little bit more into this. We talked about this a little bit last time where if they put a phone number for an apartment complex, for instance, I'll Google the phone number and make sure it is actually going to the apartment complex that they said they lived in, right?
Right.
Then I like to communicate with people via email. So then that way I know that it's coming from a valid email. I've got a paper trail and all that good stuff too when I'm getting like landlord verification
Hmm.
information.
Right.
And then if let's say the credit score is a little bit low, let's say it's like 600, we'll work with lower credit scores. I mean, we've worked with like 575 and 580, some really low credit scores. And we'll tell people we'll work with you on that if you have cash in the bank, right? If you're living paycheck to
Right.
paycheck or you're constantly in overdraft and you
Hmm.
got a low credit score and now I'm going to go ask you for $1,500 in rent and you have to pay a deposit and you might have a pet, right? That's over $3,000 they're going to have to come up with on the
Right.
first,
Right.
before they move in. And if they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're just not going to be a good fit for you you know. And the rent ready, when they submit the application, it does the background check and it does their credit check. It
Hmm.
does all that for you,
Yeah.
So all of that is legit. Now, some agents, if they're working with an agent, they may fill out an application with the agent, a trek form,
Hmm.
and that agent may also do some kind of background check and credit check and forward that to you as well. That's okay. That's usable. And kind of, if it looks good, cool, we'll keep it. If it just looks kind of weird, I've never heard of this company before, then we'll have them fill out our application
Hmm.
on Rent Ready
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we handle the screening process. It's pretty straightforward, but you definitely do not want to skip. You don't
Yeah.
want to skip, and then try to go back at least two landlords if you can. Let's say they were a crappy tenant to their last landlord. Their last landlord just wants them to move. So
Yeah.
their last
Right.
landlord might be like, yeah, they were great. Have fun.
Yeah.
But if you can
Yeah.
Yeah.
go back two landlords, right, then you can start to get a little bit more honesty. But really be, if something looks weird, Sean, we've had people try to scam us before where they'll upload their ID,
Hmm.
and they were from out of state. So it was like a Florida ID or whatever. And this person's name matched the name of an actor. And I can't remember who it was. And I was just like, that's kind of weird, right? But I mean, it could happen. You know what I mean? And then you know how on your ID you have to sign a signature on that little pad, right? And it kind of like puts it on your ID. It was
Right.
printed. It was printed. Like not like a signature. It was like printed like letters. And I was just like, this doesn't look right,
Hmm.
And come to find out, this person was trying to scam us and was using a false identity. The name, of course, was false, but the address that she was putting as her previous address was someone that was never a landlord and never rented out their property. And I called that person directly. I didn't call the number they put on the application.
Hmm.
I skip traced the address and found the owner of the property, and I called the owner, and the owner said, "This is the third phone call I've gotten. Yes, that's my address. No, I've never rented. I live here now. It's my primary home. I don't know
Right.
what's going on."
It shows that
So,
people really think they can get away with that because they
and I,
probably did at some point.
exactly, and they can when people are just doing, the bare minimum. And it's just inexperience, right?
Right.
If you're not an investor, you don't even know what the word skip trace means. You don't think about cross-referencing email addresses and phone numbers and mailing addresses, and you're not looking up the address of the apartment complex. You
Uh-huh.
just think, oh, it's apartment complex, cool. Google the address.
Yeah.
What's the street view go to? Is it an apartment complex or is it like an empty lot, right? So you just take a few extra steps. It's kind of like you're doing like a little bit of some private investigation, you know.
Right.
Absolutely. I think it's important to have a clear, like we've talked about buy box and knowing your criteria. It's going to save you a tremendous amount of time if you have a clear idea of what your criteria for a tenant
Hmm.
is. Now, some mistakes that I think some landlords make is they have too strict of a criteria. And I'll
That's
tell
right.
them if anybody has this high of a credit score of this much in reserves or has an income of this much and they call me, I'm gonna talk to them about buying a house, not renting your house.
Yeah.
Because, they're typically not always. Typically they're going to have a little bit lower credit score. Typically they're in a part stage of their life where they're not ready to buy a house. And so their income levels are typically not going to be that high. So I think having grace with those kinds of things are important. The first barrier to entry that we started doing a couple of years ago is I made just a real simple application on Google Sheets, and I have a shortcut on my phone, and if somebody calls, because there's a lot of tire kickers in the tenant world, leasing world, and so if they can't fill out that application or if they can't follow instructions, it's kind of that may be a red flag. So if I say, hey, fill this out and make sure that every adult, this is important. Anybody over the age of 18 that's going to be occupying this property needs to complete a separate application as well. So, surprisingly, that eliminates about a fourth to a third of all inquiries we get in our leases. Just sending them just a blanket like, fill this out, and then I'll show the property in 2 days, and then they'll ghost you.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yep.
that's the first barrier because what you're trying to do, you're trying to maximize the return on your time invested. And what you don't want to do is end up, I've seen this mistake. Yes, you want to have a good relationship with your tenants. And if you go back to our episode 2 weeks ago, Alberto talked about customer service, and it's important to have a good relationship with your tenants. But that doesn't mean that every time we talk to our tenants, we're on the phone with them for an hour. And I've seen that too. Or I've seen landlords just go back and forth with their tenants and not get anywhere. And that's not a really healthy way to be, because you are in a leadership position as well.
Right.
You're in customer service, but you're also in leadership here as well.
Yeah.
So,
Austin, I will add too just one more thing. One of the things that pre-qualification also does for us, right, is it weeds out the people that are actually serious about renting out your property. Because you're going to get a whole bunch of tire kickers or people just like, oh, that house looks nice. I want to go take a
mhm,
look at it. Like people just walk through open houses, for instance, that are for sale. They have no intention of buying the house. They just maybe live in the neighborhood and they just want to go see what somebody did to the house. So in that pre-qualification, probably 75 to 80% of the people never even fill it out,
yeah,
and we just move on. Right? I mean, you want to find tenants that are going to be serious about moving into your place. They're well qualified or they're qualified enough and you can work through some things and they have good communication skills with you. If they're not filling out just the basic information, they're probably not going to be good in reporting damage to the property or any maintenance issues and things like that. So
yeah,
kind of keep that in mind as well when you're doing like a pre-qual or like Austin said, he sends them out a form. It's like, hey, fill this out first.
yeah, yeah. That's important. And then the criteria we'll put on that Google
Yeah.
sheet, and so we'll have a minimum credit score. We're really looking for so no, like Albert said, like no violent felonies, no violent.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking 7 years. You may say 7 years, you may say
Mhm.
15 years. That's up to you. It also may depend on the market that you're in as well. The other thing is uh, evictions are a huge red flag,
Yeah.
and a lot of times people, and it's really sad because sometimes when you're young, you may get evicted, and you may not realize like how bad that is, but it's not a good thing to have an eviction. Sometimes people will want to have a conversation with you about it and try, same thing with, if they have felonies, they may want to try to have a conversation with you. And, again, that's going to be subjective if you're going to want to, have that conversation with somebody or not.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's going to be their word and you're just going to be kind of trusting them based
I,
on
I,
whatever.
I would try to remain as objective as possible, especially when people call you, because people will give you sad stories, and at the end of the day, Sean, you don't know them, you don't know them
Right.
personally, and you just really, really be careful. Like, don't be so anxious and eager to get somebody in there to start generating rental income because a bad tenant can just really sink your deal. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just can really, really sink your deal if you're just patient and wait for a better tenant. It doesn't have to be the perfect
Yeah.
tenant, that's going to check every single box, but you have to have some non-negotiables. Like, no, the answer is just always going to be no. I'm sorry. If you've what you went through in your life, your personal life, I'm not equipped to handle that, so I can't help you, and
Right.
and just move
Hmm.
on.
Yeah. I mean, we can go on and on about this. You just want to make
Yeah.
sure don't give them the keys until you have the deposit in the bank till the check clears.
Right.
That's a huge one.
Yes.
And I would also um probably something that we need to talk about is evictions as well.
Yeah.
You want to kind of have an idea of what that process looks like before you get into a situation and be like, oh, how do I get out of this? So you do want to
Right.
have your eviction process kind of in your head, before you go through it. So we can circle back around to
Yeah.
this one, but as far as screening and qualifying tenants, did you have any other questions about that?
Not specifically with the screening and the qualifying of the people, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, I know the other thing that I mentioned was like how you set up like the payments and the actual contract part of it, I suppose.
Yeah. You can do it any way you want. Really,
Right.
that's the answer. Now, I don't I don't typically recommend cash in an envelope.
Right.
Ideally, it's not going to require you going out to the property. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of people these days they do Cash App or Zelle, or they can do a
Yeah.
bank transfer, or they can
Okay.
mail you a
Yeah. We
check.
use the Rent Ready app. So
Yeah.
our tenants, they do an ACH connection. They can pay with a credit card, unfortunately. It does allow them to pay with a credit card, but they are charged a real like a 3% fee,
Mm,
and a 3% fee on a $2,000 rent payment, it just starts to add up every
yeah.
month. So, but they can connect through ACH, and I think they pay like $1. So I don't collect any rent, on 11 properties. Actually, I just collect one, and they live two doors down, and she
Hmm.
brings me the rent. But then what I do is for her receipt, I go into Rent Ready and say, "Hey, I received this in cash," and then she gets an email saying your payment was made.
Okay.
But you really want to try to systematize as much of this as possible, especially
Right.
with your full-time job that you have. So Rent Ready, again, it handles all that stuff. They can even make maintenance requests through there, so they're not calling your cell phone number, if something
Okay.
happens. And then in your lease agreement, you'll set expectations for the renter and for the landlord.
Hmm.
What their expectations are, what you are expected for them to do is like maintain the property, well, I would say cut the lawn and things like that, but you may not, you may have lawn service already included in your fourplex. But, they have to really maintain the property, take care of it, and report any issues.
Right.
You, as a landlord, have to make sure like the roof is good, all the structure is good, that the light is, all the electricity can be delivered to the house, I
Hmm.
mean, to the
Right.
property, right? And that you will respond within a certain amount of time
Yeah.
for maintenance requests. Some things are considered emergency, some things aren't. Emergency, it's the middle of August and the AC goes out. That's a 24-hour turnaround time or less,
Yeah.
Right.
Non-emergency is there's a slow drip on the water heater or a slow drip on I'm sorry, on like the washing machine, right? Okay, cool. I'll have a plumber out there in a day or two to
Yeah.
figure that out, right? So.
Yeah. Do you want to have a trip charge? You know, you can think of that. Some people
Yeah.
do a $45 trip charge and
Hmm.
state that, if this repair is, more than $45, the trip charge will be credited toward the repair. But if I have to unclog a toilet because you put something in there that shouldn't have been in there, then I'm keeping that
Hmm.
money. And
Hmm.
that's
Right.
perfectly reasonable to have that trip
Yep.
charge.
Yeah.
What we found is when landlords have that trip charge, they usually don't get called out in the middle of the night for clogged toilets.
Oh, yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
kind of
that's a
thing
good point.
that, yeah. And in fact, when you ask a lot of people that about investing in real estate, why they say they don't want to is because they don't want to unclog a toilet in the middle of the night. Well,
I've never unclogged a toilet.
yeah, it really doesn't happen that much if you communicate your expectations with your tenants and put everything in writing.
Yeah.
Um, so payments, you can decide that, if you want to use software like Ready, that's a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter as long as you get paid? Just,
Right.
Right.
you know, I'm not a big fan of cash. I think it should go into your bank account, but with some people, they may do cash. And then some people may want to pay ahead, so that's always
Yeah.
good too.
Hmm.
And then you talked about reserves. So are you talking about reserves for repairs, like how much you should have reserved, like set aside for repairs and maintenance?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that'd be a good topic to go into.
Yeah. What do you have a rule of thumb? So my thought, Albert, and I want to hear from you is,
Yeah.
you're going to know after your inspection report that you're going to get your inspection report this week. And you're going to try to negotiate as much as you can from the seller for any deferred maintenance or repairs that need attention in the next, even 12 months, right? So
Right.
if the inspection says the AC is about to go out, you're going to want to get a quote on the AC and maybe, negotiate with the seller. But ultimately, you may realize, hey, I got an AC that's 20 years old. It's running perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
that. But at some point, that AC is going to go out and I'm going to
And
need to
it's usually in
replace
the
it.
middle of the summer.
Yeah. So
Yep.
we're in March. It's going to happen in August or
Yeah.
July, so
Yeah.
you at least want to have money put aside to replace that AC when it goes out. Do you have a
Yeah.
more
I think for us, Austin, we don't necessarily have like a rule of thumb, per property. Um, because we do, some people keep a different bank account per property. And I think that's good, at least to start. I think that's a good idea. You have a separate business account, or some of these business accounts will let you create sub accounts. You have a specific checking account for each property. So that's really great because then you can kind of keep these reserves separated. But with our business, because we have 11 properties that we own, we manage another 13 units. And all of that just goes into one big bucket. The mortgages that we pay for our properties come out of that. We get rent payments that go in there. We get Airbnb payments that go in there. Our co-hosting payments go in there. So we don't necessarily have things specifically set aside. Now, what
mhm.
we do in the beginning, Sean, is we try to take care of as many of these maintenance issues before we get our renters moving in,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
We're inspecting the plumbing, the electrical, the AC, the roof, foundation, like all those major things. If you have a 20-year-old AC, like I'm gonna replace that. I'm not, if it's 5 years old, cool. I'm gonna start them on a maintenance cycle. I'm gonna have our AC repair company that comes in on all of our properties. They do a fall and a spring maintenance every year. They're gonna typically tell me, hey, something's going on, or you might want to check this, all those things. So then that way, when we do have an issue, it's usually very minor, Sean. It's like we're talking
Right.
like 150 bucks or something, or I can go out there and fix it. Like
Are
that's how
you
minor those things
Is
are.
that a service
Right.
contract that you have with the HVAC company?
No, it's not a service contract. I just know them. I know them. They're personal friends of mine. And they started working on our primary home
Hmm.
when we moved into it. And then when we started accumulating rental properties, I needed someone that was reliable and professional because I know a lot of HVAC people, but they're
Yeah.
not very reliable and they don't send me invoices. And it's just, the reliability was the main thing. But they're reliable and it's a professional company. They've been in
Yeah.
business for like 30 years, right? So I don't have a contract with them, but I like the fact that they reach out to me. They start reaching out to me like in March. Like
Yeah,
they're going to start reaching out to me this month. Hey, Mr. Medellin, here's your 11 properties. Let's get them on the schedule for spring maintenance,
that's good.
right? And then they start reaching out again in October for fall maintenance. So, but back to that question, Sean, like, I would just have for 4 units, I would maybe have about 5K just kind of in the bank. After you've done your repairs, you've got it rented, it's rent ready, it's ready to go. You're going to start taking tenants. Because the worst thing is you have a tenant move in and then they're like, oh, you've got this hole in the sheetrock, or you've got this leaky faucet over here underneath the kitchen sink, or the dishwasher doesn't work, or whatever, right? You want to take
Right.
care of all those things ahead of time.
Yeah.
Now, for your mortgage reserves, that's really on a case by case basis. You have to kind of figure out how many mortgage payments do I need to make without me making any income from the property. And we've
Right.
had to do that. Like we've had to use our own reserves to cover mortgages, like in the beginning
Hmm.
when we're putting a property, we're getting it ready to go. We may have to pull from our own reserves. Typically, we don't because we have reserves in our business account, but there's been an occasion where we've had to pull like $1,200 or $1,500 out of our account. Not a lot, to just cover that particular mortgage because we hadn't got a renter in
Right.
yet
Yeah.
you know. So what your mortgage is going to be when you close on this deal, or you should know, at least your lender is telling you kind of like, hey, this is kind of where we're at. This is an estimate or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
cool. If it's going to take me a couple months to get this done, I need to cover those mortgage payments for a couple months, right? And kind of
Right.
know what that is. And then moving forward, because you have 4 units, you don't necessarily have to cover the whole mortgage if you have one vacancy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So depending on how good the deal is, maybe two or three of the units can cover the mortgage, right? And then
Right.
like 1.5 times the unit is your cash flow or something like that.
Yeah.
So
The in regards to the vacancy, what looking at the market, I'll tell you right now, in Houston overall, vacancy rates are averaging about 12%.
oh wow.
That's probably what you'll experience this year is about a 12% vacancy. It's very high compared to the last couple of years.
Yeah, it is high.
But it's just a number that you got to work. You got to work with that number and
Right.
knowing that. So, I recommend, and Sean, this would be an incredibly good practice for you, and this would be your homework, is to start doing your own bookkeeping. Start keeping a profit and loss statement. On the income, on the top line where you have the income, you're going to have unit one or unit A, unit B, unit C. The top line is going to be gross potential income. This is
Mm.
this is very,
Hmm.
very important when it comes to multifamily because and if you start doing this now, you're going to thank me until the day you die if you follow this advice. You put gross potential. So you're going to take let's say you're getting $1,000 a unit on each. So you have 4 units. What's your gross potential income per month?
Yeah. I guess it'd be 4,000 as a
Four
potential.
thousand. And so you're going to put 4,000 all the way across. And so you're going to have an annual gross potential income of 48,000. So you're going to start with that line. The next line under that is going to be vacancy. You and I'm telling you it's 12%. So you're going to take that
Right.
4,000 and subtract 12%, and that's going to be your vacancy. And you're going to work to beat that number. But that's
Right.
but that's what you're going to plan. So you're going to plan if you take that $48,000 and you subtract, I'm going to give you another metric too. But if you take that $48,000 and you subtract 12% because that's what's vacancy, you can plan on having an income, gross income of $42,240. That's the 48 minus the 12%. From that number, here there's another number when it comes to multifamilies that you want to really keep in mind. It's 40%. So if you follow a 60-40 model with your multifamilies, um, you should keep your expenses, and this doesn't include your debt service. So although you're escrowing your property taxes and you're escrowing your insurance, you want your books to separate those.
Hmm.
Okay. So you're going to have your gross income and then you're going to have all your expenses, including your property taxes and including your property insurance. Then you're going to get your net operating income. Your net operating income, your goal, if you're going to be at 42,000 for your gross, you want your net to be 25,344. So it's basically 60% of your gross. You want to be that to be your net. That does not include your debt service. Repeat after me. Debt service goes below the line. Let me hear you say it.
Debt service goes below the line.
Service goes below the line. If you follow those numbers, so keeping your gross potential rental income at the top minus your vacancy, keep your expenses at what percentage?
40%, yeah.
Yeah, keep your expenses at below 40% and then subtract your debt service below that. Um, those are numbers that you want to, if you want to model a gauge for how am I doing at the end of the month, that's that's a good number to shoot for when it comes to multifamilies.
Yeah.
Oh, love
Okay.
it.
So then capital expenditures, this also needs to be mentioned. Capital expenditures versus regular operating expenses. Um, a lot of people do this one wrong as well. We see this done really, really wrong. What a lot of people are doing is they're putting their capital. Do you know the difference between a capital expenditure and a regular operating expense?
I can't say that I do off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm so glad you asked because this is a golden question. So you're going to have expenses that are going to be very consistent. Your insurance is going to be consistent. Your property taxes, um, your lawn maintenance is going to be expensive. Going to be normal. Like there's normal maintenance that's going to be the same every month. You're going to change some light bulbs. You're going to, I don't know, what else? AC filters.
Mhm.
Those are all operating expenses. That's part of that 40%. Replacing the AC system is not a normal operating expense. You only do that one, that might be every 20 years, 15 years. That's going to be a capital expenditure. So it's really important to know the difference between OPEX and CapEx.
Awesome. What about replacing appliances? Let's say somebody's stove goes out and it's just beyond repair. Is that a CapEx?
That's a CapEx because you're not replacing that stove every month.
Right.
So that's a CapEx. So those reserves are going to go toward capital expenditures.
Right, right.
That CapEx is also below the line.
Okay.
The reason is in 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, whenever you decide to sell this property, the buyer needs to know what the normal expected profit of this property is going to be.
Hmm.
And if you're replacing the stove and replacing the HVAC and replacing the roof in your OPEX, it's going to make your profits look lower than they're actually. It's not telling the true story to a buyer.
Hmm.
And
Right.
it's going to make my job harder when I have to sell this thing for you. But it's good, but you still want to record those CapEx. You just want to put them below that profit line. So you want to get your net operating
Right.
income, and then you want to get your profit after CapEx, and then your profit after the debt service as well. So that's a big one. Difference between CapEx and OPEX. And if you
Okay.
start keeping your own books, you're going to master this very, very quickly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Let's see.
We
We talked
got,
about operating expenses, repair, CapEx, personal emergency buffer.
yeah,
Um,
management versus self management. I think we talked about that a little bit. You decided that you're going to manage this yourself, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's the plan.
Now, when you go to sell, though, your buyer, because you always want to think as a buyer, you always want to think of this as something you're going to sell. If I have to sell this today, it's a good mindset to have, I believe.
mhm.
The buyer's going to add in 8% to 12% for management on a multifamily property. So that 40%, you may want to try to get that down to 32% because what you're doing is you're just adding that 8% management buffer. You're basically the manager on this one. So
Right.
you want that 40% to include property management, even if you're the one managing it. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell and say, "Hey, these things are very profitable," but you're not paying that 8% for property management.
Right.
Right.
8 to 10 is reasonable. I think anything over 12 is a ripoff, in my opinion. Do you agree, Albert?
Yeah, I think eight is definitely where it's at. I think that's kind of sweet spot for small multis. You know, I think single family homes, like we're asking for 10% on single family homes,
Yeah.
but duplexes, triplexes, quads, it's 8% for long-term rentals. As a co-host, we're in between 15 and 20%.
Hmm.
That's a lot more involved,
Yeah.
a lot more activity, but um I think, gosh, there was another thing too
So
about keeping your books. Making sure that all of your numbers look good. Uh, Austin, you kind of took the words out of my mouth with making sure that your numbers make sense. If like as if you had a property manager. You
hmm
know, one thing though that I think can be stressful for new investors, Sean, is feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Because I think when you have a single
Yeah.
family home, you have different type of stresses, right? One is, well, if there's nobody there, I'm paying 100% of that mortgage. But on the flip side of that, hey, I only have two bathrooms, one roof, one foundation to worry about. You know what I
hmm
mean? Now, if you have a fourplex, if they're all in one building, great. You still have one foundation, one roof, right? But now you have
Right.
eight toilets, to kind of mess with. And investors, new investors can kind of feel overwhelmed by that. I think at the end of the day, if you're doing a lot of this work up front, and think to yourself, whenever you experience a problem or something happens, everything is figure outable. Like you can solve anything. You know what
hmm
I mean? It may take a little bit of money and a little bit of your time, but everything is figure outable.
Right.
Like
Right.
doesn't matter how overwhelmed you might feel. You've got Austin, you can text me. And that's what's great about this
Yeah.
network, your circle of influence, is these people are here to help you if you have some general questions. Now, if you're asking me like 15 questions, like we're gonna sit down and I'm gonna be your property manager. Like maybe
Right.
maybe you need a property manager at that point, you know. But
Yeah.
you can
You can
figure out a
figure it
lot of
out,
these
Sean. You
things
can do this.
or go back to the YouTube page and just kind of go back through some of our episodes, where
Hmm
we've kind of touched on a lot of these things. Because either you have a photographic memory or you're probably going to look at this recording because I don't see you writing anything down, which is very
Right.
respectable.
Richard, did you have a question, Richard? I thought Richard said something.
I don't know.
So Sean, any other thoughts about self-managing, or hiring Albert? So we
Yeah.
lost him for a
All
second.
right.
Yeah. So utilities, who actually pays what? This is important. Um, do you know the answer to this question for your property? Like who's paying the electricity?
I believe they'll have their own separate uh, meters, so they'll have to have it done themselves to the city.
Yeah. One of my first investor clients, that was the first question he always asked, are they on separate meters? If not, we're gonna negotiate with the seller to get the money to separate these meters.
Hmm.
There are people that don't have separate meters. We have a property being sold like that, and in those cases, which fortunately for you, that's not your case, but in those cases, they do what's called RUPS, where they will, sometimes they'll charge the electric separately. They'll take the whole electric bill and divide it by, which is never fair because there's always one person using more power than the other person. But they all pay equal shares of the same electricity. If you ever
Or
rent
that,
a
or what
park,
about, yeah, I guess if they're all like the same square footage, like each unit is the same square
mhm.
footage, and then it would be like a equal between four. But if
Yeah,
you have different units that are different sizes, then it might make a little bit more sense to, apply the kilowatt per hour or whatever by the square footage, right?
yeah, but it's still not fair because you might have Richard who doesn't. turn his lights on in his house and freezes during the winter and doesn't run his AC. And then you might have Anna who's running a Bitcoin mining farm out of her apartment. There's no they're both going to be paying the same amount, and that's not really it's hard to do that. Some people, we see in RV parks and just kind of get off, but they'll sub meter uh, properties. And
Hmm.
but when you submeter properties, the landlord still has to go and take reads of the meters and then charge. So you can get more accurate by submetering, but at the end of the day, having separate meters, having the tenants responsible for turning on their power. Now you're still going to have to keep the exterior lights on, and I would say this is a to me this is very important, especially with small multis. You want your tenants to feel safe and you want them to feel comfortable. And you're going to have guys that are working nights or working late and they're going to be coming home at night. People need the lights on. And so the worst thing, is having your exterior lights all burnt out. Replace those light
Hmm.
bulbs as soon as they burn out. That goes a long way. And I think
Yeah.
your tenants will be very happy and they'll feel much safer and, you know, they're more likely to stay for a longer time.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Cool.
Then taxes. I guess we're we can just keep going on, but taxes. Um, you want to keep track of taxes. So you're
Hmm.
escrowing your taxes.
Right.
That's fine, but you want to keep, like I said, on your books. You want those taxes separated from your mortgage. Taxes is an
Hmm.
operating expense. It should be a line item on your profit. Same thing with insurance. Um, You can budget turn costs between tenants. I think this is important to hit. Um, Carpets. If you have a tenant in there for 2 years or longer, chances are you're going to want to replace the carpet. Would you say 2 years? Having a tenant in there for 2 years is probably a good rule of thumb. Hopefully,
I wouldn't know, but I would assume, yeah.
yeah,
We don't have carpet, yeah, in any of our rentals, but yeah.
yeah. If you don't, it's better. It's probably better not to have carpet, but that could be a big expense. And then any just like damage. Of course, you're gonna charge. Usually for single family homes, we charge 1 month full rent for the deposit, and you got to keep
Hmm.
that deposit on there. If they damage the property, you keep the deposit, and
Yeah,
so you
beyond normal wear and tear. I
yeah.
mean, you're gonna have scuff marks on the wall sometimes. You're you just plan to go do some touch-up painting, and it's just like you have it professionally cleaned. But if they're leaving a huge mess there, there's crayons and markers and stuff like that
Hmm.
on the walls. It's just things that are just outside of the normal wear and tear. Then you
Right.
can utilize a portion of that deposit. Now, that's, going to be down the road for you, but there are specific rules that you have to follow too if you're going to utilize a portion of that deposit for
Yeah.
repairs and additional
Right.
cleaning and things like that. And you have to document all that, have invoices, and then sending them itemized, an itemized receipt like, hey, your deposit was $1,500, but you're getting back, 1,250 because
Hmm.
of this, and then all of these things that you had to pay for outside of that. So,
Yeah.
and then you have a certain amount of time that you have to send them all that information and the deposit back. So make sure you're aware of kind of like the landlord laws, in Texas.
100%. Any other questions for today? We're gonna have you come back because we want to
Okay.
make sure you're making money.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you close on this thing and get this thing kind of stabilized, I think what would be good is referring back to some of these recordings and see
Oh yeah.
were the numbers, where you thought they were going to be, because
Yep.
Right.
sometimes we can be optimistic going in, but then when in reality, are they better or are they worse? I think that would
Hmm.
be a good follow-up.
Oh yeah.
100%. Sean, appreciate it. Thanks for entertaining us and being a part of the show. If
Dude,
nobody
thank
has
you for
any
having me.
other questions or I didn't see any, don't forget we are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Go subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, all the things. And
Right.
y'all be rooting for Sean. This is a big jump. He just skipped the whole single family phase and just went straight to he went from monoplex to quadplex. So uh, we're rooting for you and keep us posted until next time. I am your friend Austin from Houston. This is my brother Albert. Anything you need, let us know. Have a good one. Bye.
Adios.